Starting the AFC North, we're going team by team. Team needs. Let's discuss what these teams need to do this offseason, where they might go in free agency, what they need to replace, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Baltimore Ravens, first team up, PFF.com. We get the whole official write-up. Here's what Ben Lindsay wrote this, right? Yeah, Ben Lindsay's been doing some great work. Someone who can generate pressure without a blitz is the big team need. We have Matthew Judon heading to free agency. And we've talked about all year about how the Ravens have really done a nice job of scheming up pressure, blitzing more than any team in the NFL. But you still kind of want to have a guy that can go and win one-on-ones.
Yeah, I mean, they're in a great situation because what you're looking for essentially is depth and luxuries because they've done everything right. You know, they've got the quarterback, they've got weapons for him, they've added a ton of talent to the defensive side of the ball. What they could use is, you know, some future-proofing of that talent so that if a guy goes down, they're not completely screwed. And then, yeah, Judon's hitting free agency, but the beauty is he'll be on one of our sort of buyer beware lists because as much as he had decent numbers this year, what they did on defense in terms of scheming up blitz pressure.
Do you want the numbers?
Sure. You got them?
35 of his 62 pressures were unblocked or what we call clean-up pressures. Right. So like late in the down and ones that weren't necessarily from beating a blocker.
Yeah, that's a
35 out of 62. Most guys might have 15 of these, 20 of them tops. 35 out of 62, more than half.
Yeah, that's a huge amount. And his grade on one-on-one blocks is not good at all. So Judon is going to appear on a sort of buyer beware list of free agents. But that's actually a good thing for the Ravens because it means, A, you can effectively replace him without that much work and be pretty comfortable in your ability to get the same kind of production almost regardless of who you put there. But B, it means that you can get better. Because if you find a guy that can actually win one-on-one consistently, now you've got a guy who's going to get that level of pressure anyway because the scheme is generating half of it. And this guy's going to do a better job because he can actually win those one-on-one opportunities more than somebody like Judon can. So I think if the Ravens can find a legit edge rushing upgrade in either free agency or the draft, that defense can get even better.
Yeah, you don't want to be completely at the mercy of the scheme for creating pressure. So it does add a little bit more flexibility. They might want to bring Judon back if the price isn't too steep. Other things we looked at is secondary needs, interior O-line with the great Marshall Yanda getting older, wide receiver, linebacker. Just, again, going back to before the season, the fact that the Ravens essentially had a complete overhaul, not complete overhaul, but a big overhaul in their front seven and still ended up getting better defensively, going 14-2. One of the big stories because they built their defense from back to front and they did a great job of it.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's their sort of clear number one need. And I think after that, they're just looking at either depth or future-proofing the roster, getting succession plans in place for some of the aging or older veterans that they have in the team, which puts them in a great spot because it means that fundamentally this must be one of the favorites for next year and B, one of the most complete rosters in the NFL because there aren't many holes on it.
Yeah, and I think with wide receiver, they did a good job with what they had, but just adding more potential weapons there, downfield threats, and that play-action heavy attack would certainly help. Staying in the AFC North, Pittsburgh Steelers, we went with new faces on the interior of the offensive line. You got Ramon Foster, 34 years old, getting a little bit, and that's old, man, 34. He's almost our age.
Wow.
It's not good. Marquise Pouncey, again, who they love and the NFL just believes is
Pro
great.
Bowler.
Yes. He's coming off his lowest PFF grade of his career, cap hit of $11 million in both 2020 and 2021. I'm not expecting them to move on from Pouncey. Gets them into the right plays and does all these different things. But it's something we've identified as taking a step back, the interior of the O-line for the Steelers.
Their biggest need is quarterback. Ben Roethlisberger is old and busted his elbow, and Duck sucks, and Rudolph wasn't any better. So they need a quarterback quite quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ben will bounce back and still be okay, but I think they need to treat it like he won't.
Yeah, he's old and just wrecked his elbow. That's a bad combination. Yeah, all those 04 quarterbacks have basically hit a wall at this point.
Yeah. They also have a needed edge defender for like the 15th straight year. And it's because Bud Dupree hits free agency. TJ Watt has established himself as one of the league's best on one side, but those best Steelers defenses of years past. They're running a similar scheme still. Of years past, it was James Harrison, Lamar Woodley, Greg Lloyd back in the day. I mean, it's the same thing. You really need those two guys coming off the edge to make things work, and they've only got one, so it's another place for them to look.
Yeah, and honestly,
potentially draft again.
Even if Bud Dupree wasn't hitting free agency, it would be a gamble to suggest that he would do it again. I mean, his highest PFF grade before this season was 63, and it jumped up to 78 this year. His total pressures was a career high as well. Like, he was good this season, and he didn't even sustain the really good that he was earlier in the year. I mean, you'd be gambling if you banked on that happening twice.
Staying in the division, the Cleveland Browns, we went offensive tackle.
Yeah, well, the
biggest need
they had was fixing head coach, and in theory, they've done that.
In theory, yeah.
Whatever Freddie Kitchens, it just wasn't going well. Like, he wasn't able to control the personalities that were there. He wasn't doing a lot in terms of adding value from a play calling standpoint, from a scheme standpoint, fixing the things that were issues. Stefanski was one of the coaches that, by our numbers, was doing a really good job in terms of elevating the talent around him, scheming more production than the sum of the parts on offense suggested should be attainable. So in theory, Stefanski makes a lot of sense from that point of view. And, a lot of people have sort of raved about his ability to harness, personalities within a room, which is what he's going to need to do with Baker, Odell Beckham, Jarvis
Still
Landry.
a lot of talent on this team.
Well, there's a lot of talent, but there's also a lot of volatile and, strong, I guess, personalities that all need to be somehow pulled into line and work in the same direction. Like, one of the biggest problems is all these guys are just sounding off, getting progressively more irate and working in different directions all last season. Kitchens wasn't able to pull it all together. Stefanski sounds, at least on the surface, that he has a better shot at doing that.
And then the actual tackle position, Greg Robinson had a career high 66.9 grade, which was in the bottom half of qualifying left tackles. And Chris Hubbard was 36th out of 38 qualifying right tackles. So the thing about the tackle position is before they even stopped blocking guys well, Baker was bailing from clean pockets. He knew what was protecting him, and he was playing like that. We didn't know that he was going to react completely the way he did. He was much less disciplined, staying in the pocket, working through progressions this year, and the tackle position wasn't great.
Yeah, I mean, the tackles are not good, but I think they can be made to look immeasurably better if Baker actually starts to cop on and, play control within a pocket, get the ball out quicker.
In theory, in this system too, it protects the tackles pretty well because they're always they're moving the line left and right. It's boot left, boot right. It's all the different variations off of that. And even in pure drop back situations, these offenses, despite Kirk Cousins holding onto the ball, they usually do a pretty good job of getting the ball out of the quarterback's hand.
I think tackle is definitely a position they should upgrade, but in theory, Stefanski coming in should already upgrade it, as should any knock-on effect he has on Baker in terms of getting him to play better within the structure of an offense and not immediately running the hell away from the pocket into nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, if they can get both those things to work, the tackle position is already in a better spot. And then if you can upgrade the actual talent personnel, now you're in business. Because, Greg Robinson, as much as he was a high draft pick, his ceiling is like, eh.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then rounding out the AFC North, the Cincinnati Bengals.
Hometown.
I like the way we worded this.
Yeah?
Not just a quarterback. A quarterback who can deliver their first playoff win in 30 years.
Poor Andy.
That's what they need.
Yeah.
Andy could just get them on the green for some 100-foot putts.
100-foot putts.
That's all he could do. But Joe Burrow is the guy that can at least deliver a playoff win and maybe more.
Right. I mean, the Bengals, they have almost the opposite problem of the Ravens, right? The Ravens they're in a great spot because the roster is so good that they don't really have that many holes, and you're just looking for depth, right? And young guys to improve the succession plan. The Bengals are at the other end of the spectrum where they could use an upgrade basically everywhere, and therefore you can't do the wrong thing either. So for two different reasons.
Well, you can with the number one overall pick, you could do the wrong.
Well, you can do the wrong thing. You can do the wrong thing in terms of not maximizing the value, but in terms of you could literally pick any position and upgrade the roster. That's what I mean. So the Ravens have, for completely different reasons, neither of these teams can essentially screw it up, because the Ravens, because they don't really need help anywhere, and the Bengals, because they need help everywhere, consequently just pick the best players.
Do you think that there are people out there who still believe, hey, let's get Chase Young, game changer?
Yeah.
Chase Young.
Yes.
So Eric's working on a college to pro projection system, right? Which we have elements of it, but he's, honing in and, making sure all the data is looking good and all that stuff. And even the great seasons that Chase Young has, even his projections are like, you've got Myles Garrett or Cameron Jordan or Donnell Hunter and all these guys who are really good and all that stuff, but they can't carry a team. They're completely dependent on what the quarterback does. And even if you have to take the chance at the quarterback position to upgrade. This isn't even a question. Well, that they have to take a quarterback.
That's the thing, right? It would be a more interesting discussion. So Quentin Nelson is the sort of poster boy for this, right? It's like there's been no prospect in I don't know how many years that there was a greater consensus on not just him being good, but him being great at the NFL level than Quentin Nelson, right? His problem is he was a guard. So it's like, well, how valuable is that? Now, the certainty that this guy will be good and really good is worth something versus another position.
I agree.
Versus another position where the chances are way more hit and miss, right? I don't know what the percentage, the strike rate in terms of projecting a player to be great at quarterback or running back or cornerback or edge rusher or whatever, but it's high. It's a lot lower certainty than it was in Quentin Nelson, right? So the difference between those two levels of certainty is worth something, but it's probably offset by the fact that he plays guard, and even if he's great, it just doesn't make that much of an impact. Now that discussion becomes more interesting when you change the positions and you say, okay, if let's say he's not a guard, now he's an edge rusher. Now, if you have the same degree of certainty that Chase Young is going to be a great edge rusher, the conversation becomes more interesting, but then you change the other position to quarterback, and now it doesn't matter because quarterback is the only thing that matters in today's NFL. If you have a great one, you can have a pretty bad roster and still be successful. Yeah. And if you don't have one at all, nothing else matters.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, if Joe Burrow is mediocre, the Bengals are going to win 4 or 5 games. If Chase Young is Lawrence Taylor, the Bengals are still going to probably win 4 or 5 games because they're not going to have a quarterback. That's the thing, is you have to draft the quarterback with at least the hope, playing the odds that he's going to be a guy that's going to lead to multiple wins above replacement than say an edge defender.
Yeah,
that's the thing. You have to go with the quarterback. This entire draft season, though, the more we study this and everything, I do struggle with the idea, not so much the quarterback position, the idea of certainty versus upside. Mm-hmm. I got my Draft Good Players t-shirt in the PFF shop, Draft Good Players, but I don't know if I believe it anymore.
Well, the other thing is, how do you quantify that certainty, right? Because every year there's people out there that are certain X is going to be a superstar, and they're wrong because you can't be.
So for us, it's more trusting the data and just saying, okay,
right,
there are certain positions where you can predict it more. Edge defender is one of them. Interior defensive line is another one. Doesn't mean you can never miss.
But it also doesn't. I think in order for that to be a legitimate boosting argument, the certainty needs to be not just that they're going to be decent. They have to be like stars. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. You need to be certain that this guy is not just going to be a solid player, but he is going to be one of the top few players in his position in the NFL. Right. So even our data, it's been able to predict smooth translations pretty well, but you can't necessarily predict this is the next Von Miller.
Yeah, I understand. Well, there's always, anytime there's a projection, it's kind of like win projections every year, right? Even the peak Patriots aren't being predicted to win 13 games every year. It's 10 and a half. And most teams are projected to, be between 6 and 10, right? Knowing that there's going to be some teams that get to 13 or 14 and some teams are going to win 2. But projections, venture toward the middle in general. So that's how things are. Is there a case, sticking with the Bengals for one more second, is there a case to be made that they should sit there? They could sit there and evaluate Trevor Lawrence right now against Joe Burrow. They just played each other in the national championship. Is it smart to evaluate that, knowing you might not have the opportunity to draft Trevor Lawrence? And do you really want to have the first overall pick 2 years in a row? But could you actually put on the table Chase Young plus Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields or Joe Burrow and whatever you get next year.
You can.
There's so much uncertainty there, right?
You can't bank on it unless you institutionally all agree that you're going to tank the next season, which like the Dolphins tried to do that this year in terms of tanking, and then Brian Flores went out there and won 5 games or whatever it was.
Zach Taylor wouldn't last.
That's what I'm saying. You would have to, the entire organization, top to bottom, would have to commit to a year of stinking deliberately in order to make that happen. And I know they're not going to do it. Like, there's too many people who don't benefit from that to commit to that, right? Somebody, like, you're going to go out there and somebody, whether it's Andy Dalton for another year, Andy Dalton's going to go out there, have the game of his life, win, and cost them.
Andy Dalton's too good for a tanking team.
But whatever. Whoever is the quarterback, whether it's him, whether it's like their version of Fitzpatrick, somebody's going to go out there with no investment in this losing strategy,
right,
have the game of their life, win a game, and cost them that number 1 overall pick. And now you've got to make moves happen to even get to it to make that happen again. It's just never going to happen that way.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.